I grew up in Bay Point. So I went to Rio Vista and then Riverview, and then I actually graduated with Anna from Mount Diablo. So something that's kind of a reality for a lot of kids, especially where we grew up, is college isn't an easy reality for us. So like a lot of people your age, my family couldn't afford college. So I had to get a full-time job right after school. And so I started working in retail, and I did retail for years. I actually, started working in the Willow Shopping Center at a whole bunch of different places. And then I ended up becoming a diamond specialist. So during that whole time, I don't know if this gives it away, but I watched a lot of anime. So I started going to anime conventions where I met a whole bunch of gamers, and I was like, what are these gamers? I don't really understand what you do. Turns out they were actually professional video game players, and that's kind of what snowballed into me actually working in the video game industry. Is after meeting these competitive players, I decided, you know what, I could probably be really good at a video game too. So I took that extra step and I became really good at a video game. Actually, I got a world record speed trial in 1080 snowboarding for Nintendo 64. And then after that, I became 5th in the world in a competitive video game called Catherine. This allowed me to travel throughout the entire US and Canada, going to these events until I decided to try to get in the background of gaming instead of being at the forefront of competitive gaming. So that's kind of one of the facets of gaming you could actually go into, is just being a pro player. Now, unless you're the best in the world, you're not going to make any money. You might get free trips to all of these tournaments, and maybe some free food, and like, here's $1,000 for showing up. But that's really it. There's no way to really base a career off of that unless you are really good at a highly competitive payout sport, which is going to be Dota or League of Legends. So after I retired from becoming a pro player, I decided that the only way I would get into gaming is by going to college. Yeah, big surprise. I waited until I was 25 to go to college. And I went to DVC. I just did, classes that weren't necessarily there for me to specifically get an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, but I took a whole bunch of random classes that I was curious on learning more about, like public speaking. I took ceramics class because I was like, I wonder what it's like to throw pottery. But taking those random classes and making sure that I, was focused on learning instead of having that full college experience is something that made me ready to actually kind of take that step up and not only have a full-time job that I could support myself off of, but to have a career that I could grow with. So during taking classes at DVC, I got recruited at a video game company that was a startup. It was called Wave Dash Games, and they were creating a Steam game that was almost like Super Smash Brothers, but with their own original characters. So I started working there as an office manager, part-time, because I was still going to college full-time. And I was very lucky to have that opportunity to do both, dip my toe in the water of gaming industry while also learning on how to move forward with my life with college. I did office management, and then they bumped me up to HR. So I was the liaison in between all of the legal side of everything. So hiring and termination, and especially with the gaming industry, you'll find that people from all over the world want to join. So I actually handled a lot of visas and citizenship applications from us being a company sponsor. Now, something that is kind of one of the harsh realities in gaming is if you work at a newer studio that doesn't have a lot of titles under its belt, there's a good chance that it's not going to survive. And it was, you know, my first job in the real professional industry, and it was heartbreaking when the CEO, you know, took me aside one day because I was the only HR representative, so I'm the only one who can have, you know, these confidential information. And he tells me that next Monday will be everyone's last day and the company is going bankrupt. So that's always a risk that you're gonna take from working in the industry. And it could be a really good risk, you know, in a good way, where you work at a startup, there's 30 people, you make a game that so many people buy, which means that your company can pay you more because they're making a lot more revenue. Or it could go the way that it did with me. There's a quote that my CEO said that I will never forget. And he said, "I can honestly say that opening up a company was the best decision of my life because now I know I'm the only person I know that has wasted $10 million. Yeah, $10 million went down the drain from hiring 35 people to just try to work on a game that never launched. That's the kind of risks these people take. And that's, you know, something where if you're really passionate, sometimes it's worth it. But that's just one of those things that you really have to think about if you want to ever open up your own gaming studio. You have to make sure that you're going to get something in return, or you're not wasting your own money and you get people to kind of back you up and buy out portions of your company to help you in that. So after Wavedash, I actually got recruited to Crystal Dynamics. And it's a completely opposite experience than working at a tiny startup in a shared office in Oakland. This is a AAA game studio, has its own building. Our parent company is Square Enix. Do you know how many times I played Final Fantasy and didn't realize that it was Square Enix until I worked there? That's insane. So all of my childhood dreams like came true because now I work at a company where I never envisioned myself working. I didn't know that would be a reality for me. I mean, I never graduated college. I took 1 year of full-time classes. And now I'm at this giant AAA game studio that just launched one of the largest IPs in the entire world. So that's incredible. And I went to the same high school as a lot of you guys. So here's a couple jobs that you could have in gaming. So what I do is I'm actually a studio administrator. So basically, if you imagine kind of like that classic Halloween spider web, I'm right in the middle because there's all of these little departments that, you know, need answers from someone. And if anybody have questions from this side of the spider web and they have a question from this side of the spider web, they ask me who to talk to from that department. So I am kind of the middleman in everything. If somebody has questions about how to, you know, get in touch with the finance department to get expense reports or scheduling time with HR to production dates and running events, I'm your girl. So with that, if you are good at math and you're just like okay with doing that for the rest of your life, you could be in the finance department of a gaming studio. Because otherwise, if you don't have a finance department, like the startup I worked at, you're gonna waste $10 million and not realize where it went. So that's super, super critical. Another one is programming and software engineering. You can't really have, you know, an online game without either one of those platforms. For coding language, learning C++ will save your life, but since it's a language based in technology, that might change in the next couple years, because every time there's a new update when it comes to Unity, which is where you code to make games, it's basically like learning a whole new language. It's a lot of copy and paste and a lot of, it's not even HTML anymore, which is what people used to do for coding and building websites, but that's almost dead. So if I were to become a programmer, I would be awful at it, because the last time I did that was like a Neopets pet page, and I don't even know if that's a thing anymore. It's not. So another thing too is, if you're, let's say you're really good at meeting people, you love going to social events when it's safe, you loved just kind of like mingling around and being like, hey, I'm this person, who are you? You'd be a great recruiter. To be a recruiter, you don't necessarily need to know every single detail of every single job description. What you need to do is have really good intuition about who you think will try the hardest, or who has a specific set of skills. It doesn't necessarily have to be a cookie cutter, person for your cookie cutter job. No matter how cookies look, they're most likely going to be good. If you get a bad one every once in a while, it's worth a try. So how you make a game, I'm going to ruin something for you guys. A lot of people think that they want to work in gaming so they could just work from home and never talk to anybody and be alone. That's not true. I work with a team of over 300 people every single day. And that includes the engineers, the programmers, the production crew, the executives, our brand team, everyone. Everyone has to talk to each other to make sure you have a very fluid game, because otherwise you're going to have fighting mechanics on one level of the game that are completely different from fighting mechanics on the other level of the game, and it'll feel like two completely different things. So if you want to become a programmer and not talk to anybody, and just work from your home on the computer all day, don't do it. Don't work in gaming. You actually need to collaborate with people and talk to them, and make sure that you understand where they're coming from with their ideas and try to implement your own as well. It's all about collaboration, because if you're one person trying to work on a game, you're never going to finish it. It's simple as that. You're going to be, I don't know how young you guys were when Pokemon Go came out, but there was basically like a 6-week period where you just like couldn't open Pokemon Go and have it not crash on you. And that's because that came from a development team of 3 people. 3 people made that game. And that's why you couldn't play it for the first 6 weeks, because there were so many bugs. Now that is a much larger team. I think they are up to 120 people working on that game. So from launch of 3 people to now, where you can actually load up the game and have all of these cute outfits, and the GPS doesn't put you in the middle of an ocean, like, it's good now. And that's because they hired so many people that could help them out, and they weren't focused on trying to do a passion project with 3 people. Being a producer is almost like a project manager in gaming. Every single company, you have the option to become a producer. Producers basically look at the goals that the CEO or whoever the directors are, the goals and the timeline. And you as a producer are assigned a team, and you have to make sure that each person on your team can meet that deadline to make sure that there's no issues with your production date, with your launch date, with bug fix dates or updates, anything like that. So a producer, depending on the level, can be in charge of, 3 to 5 people, all the way up to 100 people, just to make sure that those deadlines are made. Because I don't know if you know, with the Avengers, we actually had to postpone the launch date 6 months. Our original launch date was supposed to be in 2019, and we just came out September 4th. So we needed that extra time to make sure that the game was as refined as we needed it to be proud to put our name on it. And, you know, we were lucky enough to have our parent company, our CEO, and our board of directors agree with us. We've proven ourselves so many times making all of the Tomb Raider games that when we asked for the extra time, they allowed us to do that. Let's see. Another thing about gaming that is, I'm not gonna, you know, try to make this all feel great and good all the time, because that's just not the reality of the situation. Gaming is a very harsh environment. A lot of Silicon Valley especially has these ideas of what is a good worker. And a lot of that time, it doesn't have any place for boundaries with work. There are companies that expect you to, especially now that it's work from home, be at your computer all the time. I get an email at 11 p.m. and then the next day it's like, hey, how come you didn't answer my email? I'm like, well, I was 2 glasses of wine in and you really didn't want my response at 11 p.m. So that's kind of the harsh reality. It's really, really competitive, and you will have to do that grunt work. And it can actually become a problem based on which companies that you work at. It's really, really important to put those boundaries up for your mental health, and then also so you don't feed into that toxic work environment. There are a lot of people that are willing to, you know, work themselves to the bone just because they're doing something that they're passionate about. And that's fine, but that's how you get burnout. My first round with my burnout, I was unemployed for a year. That's when I decided to like move and go back to college, because I was so burnt out from working all the time in that esports industry. I would fly out every single Thursday and fly home every single Monday. I was home for 2 weekends over the span of 5 months. And that was it. And there are some companies that will penalize you for putting up those boundaries. Like, hey, I'm okay, you know, working 1 weekend day every so often, but if you're asking me to work 7 days a week, that's just not going to be a reality for me, you know? Another one too is when you're joining, no matter how big you think the gaming community is, it's actually really small. Everybody knows each other all the time. My CEOs at our studio, we have 2 studio heads. They know everybody from Sony to, you know, Microsoft. One of them is married to an executive at EA Games. So it's an extremely small industry. So if you do something really dumb that you know you shouldn't have been doing, no one will hire you again, ever. It's really, really hard to recover when you trip and fall like that from, you know, your career platform. You have to be very, very careful about who you surround yourself with and who you build your support system around. There are certain people where if you tell them like, hey, my company is doing this really bad thing, I'm really mad at my boss, there are some people from the industry that know your boss and will just tell you about it. Like, hey, Kara's really mad at you because you said this thing. And that can also get you fired. So it's really, really critical to find people that you trust right away and stick with them. You become almost your own little clique in your community. And that doesn't mean you have to ostracize other people out of your little clique, but you really have to make sure that the people that you trust stay close with you. Do I have a similar background as some of my colleagues? No. A lot of my colleagues come from a, college background, middle America situation where they're like, yeah, I went here, I had an internship at this company, and then I decided to work at this company. Where I was a diamond specialist who was in competitive games. They have their bachelor's degree or their art degree. But there's also like a lot of other random people. One of my coworkers used to be a baker. So yeah, it's a weird world. And as long as you try really hard, you might not get in. But if you try really hard and you adapt to being that good cookie I was talking about, then you'll be fine. Something else that's really cool is the money. You don't make a ton of money, obviously, because otherwise, I would own my own home and have a nice car and stuff. But it's like, this is the first time where I was driving to work one day before, because I've been at the studio for, before the pandemic. I know, it's crazy. But I was driving to work one day and I was like, this was the first time I thought about this. And I was like, if I had a kid right now, I would be okay. I had enough job security. I had good insurance. Like, I would actually have the option to take, a parental leave, which was incredible for me because I've always been in that retail mindset where you're so easily replaced that I know it's against the law, but there are some companies out there where, like, if you tell your boss you're pregnant, they're going to find any excuse to get rid of you, because that's basically free money for a certain amount of time where you're not going to be working or anything. Where I actually felt secure enough in my job where I knew I would be fine. So I got a dog. That's my version of a kid, at least for now. You have to define what success is to you and not rely on the terms of the system or your company or your team. If success to you means having job security and having good insurance, and building a platform for yourself so you can slowly work your way up, great, build that. But if your definition of success is, not being stressed and putting boundaries up at work and, making sure that other people enjoy their job as much as you do by trying to make their job easier, which that's my job, is to try to make everybody else's job easier, then, then I am successful in that. Are there any general characteristics for recruiters you look for? Charisma is always going to be a good characteristic for a recruiter. And honestly, scheduling. Being a really organized person for recruitment is essential, because a lot of interviews that you're going to have when you're first starting out, they're going to be like, okay, this is our half-hour interview. Here is an application, and it's 15 minutes of questions. They hire you or not. For something a little bit more gaming speed, my interview was 4 hours long. I was in a conference room for 4 hours. I met with 6 people to get a job. So it really depends on, the recruiter had to schedule all 6 of those people, made sure that they were all free at certain times, including, 4 executives, which as soon as you look at an executive's calendar, you just have an instant anxiety attack because they're triple booked for every hour. West Coast gaming studios. There's tons. Literally almost anything is out here. You have Atlas, Crystal Dynamics, EA, Sony, Microsoft, Warhammer, Naughty Dog, whoever invented Fortnite is out here too. I just forgot the name of that, which I probably shouldn't have. But yeah, literally any kind of game studio, Silicon Valley, Bay Area, San Francisco, they're going to be #1. Twitch is out here, which is now Amazon now, so that's a huge disappointment, but we can't save the world by ourselves. Let's see. I'm going to start answering some questions because that was most of my talk, which I'll tie in some other things as well. How are artists treated in the video games industry? Again, artists are treated as well as the company is. If the company is mistreating their artists, they are most likely mistreating most of their employees. So you have to find a company that you are confident will, you know, be okay for you in the long term. And if not, find a good one on the short term so you can get the work experience and put that on your resume. Sometimes it's really easy to work for a bad company for a little while just so you can have that kind of step up into, you know, a broader world for yourself. And it also depends on the kind of art. There's so many different kinds of art, which I didn't even understand. We have concept art. There are storyboard artists. We have environmental artists, which just like create the environments in the game. There's level artists that do all of the level designing. And then we even have just like stylists that just do stylistic art for all of the different outfits for purchase. So, and VFX, oh, there's so many. If you love art, it's such a weird niche to get into as far as gaming goes, because you have 2D, 3D, texture art, environment, everything. Everything imaginable. Oh, so East Coast studios is harder. There are a lot less East Coast studios than West Coast. The number 3, or the 3 major cities that have the most gaming jobs are going to be San Francisco, Seattle, and Austin. Everybody is opening up studios now in Seattle and Austin. So working on the East Coast in gaming would be very difficult unless you do a remote work, and then you're on a different time zone than everybody else. So it's also a lot harder to become a permanent remote worker at specifically California-based studios, because for that, there are different tax laws that companies have to pay for each remote worker that they have. So like my company, out of 300, we have 6 people that are remote workers from out of state. That's it. And that's just because there's so many different like weird tax laws that just, they don't make any sense to me. I don't deal with that portion. And I also don't think it's the smartest thing to have. Especially like we're all remote right now. Whatever. But that's not gonna be the best. You need to live where you work, basically. That's what I'm saying. What type of platform games are the hardest to make? Well, Stadia. Google Stadia is not out yet. So Google Stadia is very hard to program for because it's kind of a new language for everyone. There's a lot of weird extra things that you have to code for, again, just because there's no template. At least not as tested template as they want. But yeah, Microsoft and Sony have been around for so long, it's kind of easy to know, you know, what will break this and what won't break this. But with Stadia, there literally hasn't been any games released on it. So it's all kind of a guessing game. And then if we find something weird, we have to talk to Google about it to see if they knew about that bug in the first place, instead of just going to an open forum. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Now that I've kind of, does anybody have any other questions? Because otherwise we're gonna get into some weird stuff about gaming. Everything's kind of weird with gaming, so. Okay, cool. So something else about gaming that I did want to touch on, especially with, you know, where we all kind of grew up, it doesn't necessarily look like what you picture a gaming studio to look like. There is definitely a need for, you know, women and people of color everywhere in gaming. There has actually been proven articles that certain people do not get hired based on their background at companies, and that's not okay. So, you know, there is going to be that stark difference. Like for me, at my studio, we have a really, really high percentage of women at our studio, and it's resting at 30%. Only 30% of our employees are women. And out of our directors, we only have one female director as well. So it's kind of weird in that sense. I mean, compared to even, I was really lucky. I went to our Japan office, the Square Enix headquarters in Tokyo, and even there's kind of that huge influx of that gender abnormality of mostly men, a few women. And that's something that you would have to deal with. It's also very hard to hear some of the comments people say when you work in that industry. So whether or not you're male or female, you just have to learn how to be respectful to everybody, and again, have that support system of that kind of internal community that you made. There's been a lot of times where I go to an event and people walk up to me and ask who I'm there with. And they don't mean which company, they mean where's my husband. So that's kind of a hurdle of, you have to not have a temper and just handle it gracefully, where you're just like, oh, actually, I'm here with Crystal Dynamics. You know, it's something where you can't excuse that, but you also have to learn how to kind of control that anger, because there's so much going on outside of the industry that you can't make it harder for yourself. Yeah. Sorry, it's weird. Hopefully, you know, by the time that you guys get successful in this, that will be a lot less common of an issue. I'm doing my best on trying to kind of weed that out. I've given talks at the Microsoft headquarters in Times Square about specifically diversity in gaming and LGBTQ plus in gaming, everything like that, to just kind of open up the eyes and try to open up the doors to that industry. A lot of the times we are, you know, we think that society is pushing us down a hallway that doesn't have a lot of doors, but there are so many doors out there that you can just make for yourself, as long as you kind of allow yourself to do that, and you know, take everything with a grain of salt. Yeah.
Kara, I have a question. By any chance, do you know if any of these companies have some kind of programming that students, maybe high school or college students, can look into or participate in by any chance? Do you know?
Typically, yes. Typically during GDC, which is in March which is the Game Developers Conference, a lot of studios will offer kind of like open junior days, which are like, hey, you don't have a job in the industry, but you're invited to this thing as long as you sign up for it. And it's basically like a job fair, except instead of actively hiring, it's actively teaching you about the company. And then also learning, you know, what students are learning so that they kind of have a foot in the door when they are graduated and ready for those positions. So usually that happens during March, which is during GDC, but also there are master classes that a lot of companies are offering, and a lot of internship guidance depending on which colleges you go to. And if you don't go to college, God, how do you do this during a pandemic? Oh gosh, I am so sorry. I'm like, how did I got into this because I literally just started going to events and meeting people at events. I'm sure there's a lot of online job fairs with gaming. I know that our company was planning on hosting one, but again, that wouldn't be until March. But mostly you want to look for game design junior days on the internet, and something will likely pop up from one of the local companies. Just remember C++. It's a really good coding language that will get you a lot of places. Yeah, that'll get you anywhere from like programming automatic cars to gaming. C++ is the universal coding language right now. Yes. Oh yeah, and as far as like working in the industry and having insurance and benefits, do it. You're never gonna find insurance like the gaming community. Most larger companies actually pay your insurance, which is something that I've never heard of. I'm used to paying, you know, $240 a month for, you know, to have crappy insurance where I still pay, you know, $4,000 every time something happens at the hospital. But there's a lot of mental health services. So a lot of companies do offer, you know, therapy providers, also ergonomics and physical therapy for free. There's free massages when you're back in the office. It's ridiculous. There's a lot of perks that come with the job. But again, it's kind of like that payoff for expecting you to work, you know, 14-hour days or 6 to 7 days a week. So we want to make you comfortable because we want you to be dedicated to us. It's almost like an incentive. So, but it's nice.
There's a question in the chat box.
Yeah.
It says, is it hard to get internships? Where would you recommend looking for them? So as a high school student, would you say the junior days would be the same, or would that be different?
That would be different. So junior days are more for college students. As far as high school students, I actually don't know of any programs at any studios. And I'm one of the people who run these programs. So I just don't think that gaming has paid attention, I guess, to high school students as seriously. And that's just because there are so many facets to gaming and so many different jobs you could potentially have, that it's really hard to narrow that down, you know, when you're 17 or 18 years old. I think the youngest person at my company is 23, and they're a fresh college graduate. And I started working there when I was 25. So I think that's kind of more of when you start to get into the industry. You do a lot of internships in your junior and senior year of college. So that's something that I wouldn't be worried about at your guys' age. And if you don't go to college, again, go to those junior days and just show people that you're passionate about it. That's like the number one thing gaming companies look for. If you're in your interview and you're like honest with them, like, I know how to use Excel and Microsoft 365. I'm not an expert at it, but I'm willing to learn more about it because I love Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider is amazing. Lara Croft is my hero. They're going to be like, yes, you're in. We love you. You care about us. And that's something that will like show them that you are kind of a step above the rest because you're willing to put more into it. How do they shade avatars in the game if they're constantly moving? VFX. So VFX art, if you are going to be some kind of 3D artist, VFX, I am telling you, is something, there's not a lot of people that do it. There's tons of job security and you get paid a lot because there's only so many people that have the same skill set as you do. Get into VFX. There are not many out there, and companies are always hiring, and it usually takes 8 months to 2 years to find a VFX artist for a full-time job. It is ridiculous. What is my office culture like? So it's, what is my office culture? Okay, something that's kind of a big surprise is that our development floor is dark. All of the lights are off. And you just see the glow of computer screens. It's mostly open office. We call it honeycomb style because there's kind of oblong desks like this that are like a trio of little like, what are those? Yeah, just like little honeycombs. So if I'm standing at one side, I can see the wall on the other side of the studio, but I can't see everyone's computer screens because they're like not all facing towards me. Yeah, the weirdest part though is the darkness. That's just, it's weird. I never thought I would walk into an office and be like, are the lights on? No, you don't want them on. And like, as far as the culture goes, it's one of those things where most people kind of stick to themselves at their desk. But once you go into our common space, like our kitchen area, because sometimes you start up a conversation on a snack wall with somebody you've never seen. Or after you work there for a little while, I had a group of people, we made our IT team renovate our giant Lara Croft arcade shooter game into a Super Smash Brothers mega projector. So we played a whole bunch of Super Smash Brothers while everybody else played League of Legends or WoW Classic on the computers next to us. Yeah, so I mean, it's fun to work there, but it's also a lot of hard work. Do you have to be a 3D artist to create games like Legend of Zelda or Mortal Kombat? Yes, because there's still perspective. The background is separate from the character, so it's technically still 3D. You just won't have to get as in-depth as you would with things like Assassin's Creed or Tomb Raider. Do you have to be good at math to be in any position? No, but you have to use a calculator. I am awful at math. I am so bad at math, but I've learned now that I didn't know Excel could do math for you. I've learned that over the years. If you plug a formula into Excel, it'll do the math. And then you can add that into whatever column you need math done in. And that's incredible. That like shortens my math by 10 times and makes a lot less mistakes than I do. But yeah, if you're going to be in coding or programming, you're going to need to know math, especially like one of my friends at the studio, she's a level designer, and being a level designer, you need to know. We joked about it yesterday where she was like, I thought I was at a point in my job where I could stop using math, and boy, was I wrong. She just got a whole bunch of projects that are all math-based. So, yeah, it helps, but just utilize tools around you. Trying to make the workload on yourself less has something that has been night and day for me. I used to try to do everything by hand. I'll show you guys. I have all of these notebooks and 2 more that I can't reach right now. And these are all for work. So like, this is something where I was doing things by hand for so long that I could have just put it into a computer and had it be automatic this whole time. Like, this is literally a coding on how to make a newsletter that is just in a notebook. It doesn't even have lines. This is a watercolor notebook. So this whole time you could just plug it into we use something called Confluence, which is basically just almost like a blog spot. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but you make your own pages, and most companies actually use Confluence for training programs because they're really easy to make tables and take screenshots and plug them into a public forum. So at our company, you can just go to Confluence and say, like, I need help to do an expense report, like how to do an executive expense report. And then it'll pull up a page, tell you which department it's from. So since I'm in the administration department, I'd click on the administration one, and all of the instructions are already there. But instead, I have to find my watercolor notebook and try to find the page that's half eaten by my puppy. So just doing simple things like that and just trying to do less yourself, even though it might be more work to learn those systems, it's 100% worth it to use the systems that your company has to make your job more efficient, especially if you ever have to replace yourself at a job. Because then instead of trying to, like, I would have to mail somebody that half-eaten puppy page right now because of COVID safety. To try to have them figure it out 10 days later when they get it from USPS. So if it was in the system, it'd be totally different. One more facet actually about gaming that I didn't actually touch on is the operations portions. If you want to get into gaming, but you're like, no, I don't want to code. No, I'm not good at art. What could I do? You could basically just be operations, which is handling all of the catering, any kind of food, like snack options, or especially in times like this, you know, I was one of the people that created our, you know, work from home policy, along with our, if you do have to come on site for anything, these are our new guidelines. We created a 17-page document in 1 week of just, these are our social distancing, here are stickers on the floor, this is our tracking system, and we had to create that from scratch because nobody has been through a pandemic before. So that was kind of something that if you're a thinker, there are 2 different kinds of workers. There are thinkers and there are robots. If you are a very robotic person and you're just like, I'll do the work that you give me, perfect. And then there's people that are like, here's a concept, think about it. So I'm more of a thinker kind of worker. So when they were like, hey, there's a pandemic, we need to get everybody working from home in the next 4 hours. That was something that was like, oh, okay, so we need to find these sheets, we need to figure out equipment that these 175 people, you know, need to be able to have a successful working from home experience. And then we need to be able to track anything in case there is a positive case of coronavirus somewhere in our building. So yeah, there's so many different jobs that you can have that even if you're just passionate about it, you can pretty much sell yourself to any studio as long as you know that you could make a difference. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have about 9 minutes left, so I want to be really mindful of your time. We do have a question that was sent to me privately, and maybe you can touch on it really quick.
Yeah.
But the question is, if you are new to a company, is there a high likelihood you would get laid off, especially with given times, like what's going on right now?
Like most of my answers, it depends on the company. There are some companies that are deeply, deeply affected by the pandemic and coronavirus, where they have frozen all hiring. They do have to lower, their headcount to make their budgeting goals. But there are other companies like the company that I'm with, which we're actively hiring. We've hired over 35 people since work from home started. And that's something that we're really proud of. And honestly, a lot of gaming companies are doing really good right now because this is something that you can do from home successfully. And it actually saves a lot of cost. Our company, I can't say an exact number, but I've never even seen this much money in my life. And we have saved just that much money on catering this year alone. Because we don't have to supply, lunch and dinner for everybody, 5 days a week. That adds up. Lunch and dinner catering is really expensive. Yeah.
Thank you for that question, for answering that question. If anyone else, it looks like there's one more question. And it says, how much do people that cater get paid?
People that cater get paid, I don't know because I hire them. So I pay the catering company directly. So our caterers are just the sweetest people ever, Miguel and Fanny, and they are amazing. And I hope that they get paid a lot of money. I know both of them do have families, so they, I hope that they're able to support themselves. They seem like happy people. So I'm not sure how much the caterers get paid. Yeah, I just know how much that I give them.
Okay, so if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to add them now. And then if you do not have any questions, what we are going to do is I'm going to exit out of speaker view, and then we're going to take a picture to put up on the district Twitter page, if you're okay with that, Kara.
Totally fine.
Okay, cool. So I'll give it about a minute until it's 1:55 for any questions. If not, we'll go ahead and go and take the picture.
Wait,
Yes.
Does the district have a Twitter page?
Yes, we have a lot of Twitter pages, actually. I will send you the name so you can follow it if you'd like to retweet.
Oh my God. I had no idea. What is school these days?
It's actually really popular.
We had, remember those colored square MacBooks, those giant PCs in our computer lab? Yeah, we had to deal with Apple-y bubble TVs that were all different colors. It was so weird. Oh man.
I definitely remember them. If you could leave everyone with maybe just like one piece of advice, what would you say? And then we'll go on to take a picture.
The piece of advice is something that the number one thing that you really have to do is build your support system. You need to be able to have those people around you who can support you through the good, through the bad, and, be your little cheerleaders. A lot of my support doesn't even live by me. Most of mine are actually in New York and Los Angeles. And sometimes we just hop on the phone, once a month and vent and, try to validate ourselves and make each other feel better. It's the number one thing you can do.
Thank you. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to